Hello and welcome to this modeling series. This marks the start of our bike design. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a little context regarding my background to set the stage. I'm an aerospace engineer with close to 2 decades of experience designing and testing aerospace systems. And I have a strong passion for invention and innovation, essentially creating things that don't exist yet. So, throughout this modeling series, I'll show you how I think through any design work. Though this is nothing close to airplanes, I still think it relates to engineering, and we will definitely refer to other sources for any information or additional information if we need to. So any product goes through several iterations before the finished product is realized. This is a time-consuming process, and so typically companies would have a whole team tackling this problem. Each team will be responsible for a specific part of the entire vehicle. In our case today, the team is just one person, you. So just be patient through the course of the design and don't be afraid to make mistakes. This is how you learn anything in life. So you fall and you got to pick yourself back up again and just keep going. In any design process, it helps to have different views of the vehicle in question. Since we have just one image from which we would like to create this race bike, we need a rough sketch of the proportions before we start anything. It also helps to use proportions of existing bikes to help us quickly start this modeling process. The first thing we're going to do is to bring in our image, our reference image. So I will click on this cube and then I'll press X on my keyboard to get rid of it. And now let's click on this face on the view cube to get into the XZ plane. I'm going to drag my image all the way into the viewport and I'll drop it. So let's zoom out a bit. So what I'll do is I'll press G and then I'll press Y to move the image up and down. If you press X, it'll move it left and right. So the quickest way to know what to press is to look down here. This is where all the shortcuts are. This is how you quickly know which key to press on your keyboard. So we're going to press Y and I'm going to move this all the way up a little bit so it sits right on the horizontal axis X. And now we have our image inside of our modeling viewport. Now let's move this backwards a bit. I'll press G and this time I'll press Z because I want to go in the blue direction, and then I'll move it all the way back. So think of it as our bike is going to sit right here, and this is our reference image to help us figure out which parts of the bike to model. So let's go to this view and I'm going to press S to scale it up, and then I'll press S again, because when you press S again you essentially scale this whole object in all the different directions. So press S and I'll scale it up a bit, and we may end up scaling it up again once we figure out what the proportions are, but this is just to position the image so that you see exactly where we're going to start modeling. And then I'll hit enter to accept, and I'll press G again and Y to move it all the way up so it sits on the red line again, this horizontal axis. And then I'll hit enter to accept. So when you think of any vehicle, you have to understand that it is interacting with the air around it. Now, to understand how that airflow interacts with the body is very key for any design, be it a car, airplane, motorbike, you name it. And so in this case, that's what I think about when I am designing any vehicle. So I'm going to draw some imaginary lines here. You see this airflow goes over on the top, and there's still more air molecules going over the top of the vehicle. And you have some flowing over here as well, where the handlebars are, as well as over the center, and finally around the wheels closer to the ground. So this is what I think about as well, because this will dictate how the surfaces should look like. And in any performance bike or any performance vehicle, this is crucial. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. And I digress a bit going into aerodynamics, but it's very important that you start thinking that way whenever you're designing any object that moves through air. Now let's switch gears and think about how we're going to approach this problem. First of all, the easiest point of entry, remember, we are looking for the easiest point of entry for our design. And I see this as being right here in the front wheel, because this will give me a strong basis in terms of how I'm going to model the whole thing, right? You don't want to start with something complex, like around the center section here. It's very complex looking in terms of angles and how the surface will look like. So you don't want to start over there. So let's pick something very easy for us to model so we can get some reason or motivation to keep going. So that will be number one. Number two will be right here, because once we have this front wheel, we can easily scale it up to get the back wheel, right? And add all the other aesthetic looks right here as well. So when that is done, we will move over to the center section at the top here and model the seat, right? We'll model the seat and also get some of these cool looking flanges and brackets here. And then we can tackle the front and the handlebars next after that. And then finally, we will tackle the center section of this bike, which is number 5. So this is how I plan to approach this problem, right? First going right here, and then going right there to here, and then finally the center section. And so that is the approach I'm going to take. Now let's talk a little bit about the front wheel. So you can see that this section right here is not really clear in terms of the image. And so what I think I will do is right here. So I would have to kind of improvise and use my intuition whenever I'm designing something like this. We can do a quick Google search on typical designs on how the brake disc is held on to the wheel with existing technology, and see how we can even improvise and come up with a much cooler design with that. And then that is attached to this brake disc here, and ultimately both are attached to the wheel. And so this is definitely something that we can work through, but overall, as I said before, this is our starting point, and we will jump right into it and start modeling.